I still haven't gotten that either, Cindy, regarding services. We've worked with the trustees at Sunrise United Methodist Church in Mounds View to transfer ownership of the church and parsonage to the conference. We've responded to a legacy trust property issue in southern Minnesota. We've also continued to hold the previous St. Croix Valley Church and Parsonage for Embrace Church campus and parsonage, and in May of 2022, this month, we have transferred the property to Embrace Church, to Embrace Minnesota Church, and we bless that work. Finally, in addition to overseeing the property and other fiduciary responsibilities for the annual conference, the Board of Trustees has, along with the Conference Disaffiliation Task Force, worked with local churches who have discerned that their path goes a different direction from that of the Minnesota Annual Conference of the United Methodist Church. In 2019, an amendment was added to the Book of Discipline, providing for a time-limited window for churches to disaffiliate over the narrow issue of disagreement over human sexuality, a provision which is closed as of December of 2023. 3 churches have elected to disaffiliate under this paragraph, which is paragraph 2553. They are in process with the Board of Trustees regarding property disclosures and paying for both unfunded aggregate pensions and apportionments. The annual conference needs to ratify the terms of these disaffiliations, the template of which was sent out with your conference materials. The disaffiliation team and the Board of Trustees approved this template so that any church discerning their future would know what is required, and we could maintain consistency in executing the process. It contains the terms of disaffiliation for each church. It's only the names and numbers that change. We have these resolutions as follows. Disaffiliation, do we have the slides ready? Thank you. The disaffiliating churches, we will take each one of these in turn because each one of these churches is disaffiliating on their own terms. So we will take a vote on each of these churches separately. First is the disaffiliation of Crossroads Church in Lakeville. Whereas Crossroads Church is located in Lakeville, Minnesota, and has entered into faithful discernment and held congregational meetings with annual conference representatives to understand the implication of disaffiliation. Whereas the duly called church conference of Crossroads Church, presided over by Cindy Gregerson, voted with a 2/3 majority of those present and voting on April 24th, 2022 to disaffiliate from the United Methodist Church in accordance with paragraph 2553 of the 2019 addendum to the Book of Discipline. Whereas the Board of Trustees of the Minnesota Annual Conference approved the completed disaffiliation agreement that outlined a payment of $244,610.59 of the church's pro rata share of the Minnesota Annual Conference's unfunded aggregate pension obligation, and 12 months prior of their apportionments and a future 12 months of their apportionments, which adds to a total, although if they're up to date, they just have the continuing 12 months of $86,838 for the current year and future year apportionment. And the congregation approved said disaffiliation agreement at a duly called church conference May 19th, 2022 by a 2/3 majority vote. Whereas there are no outstanding debts, loans, and liabilities remaining to the Minnesota Annual Conference by Crossroads Church. Whereas all property and assets of Crossroads Church have been disclosed to the Conference Board of Trustees, and the property to leave with the church include the church building at 5590 Babcock Trail, Inver Grove Heights, Zion Cemetery, Babcock Trail, Inver Grove Heights, church building at 17671 Glacier Way, Lakeville, including the land on which these buildings and cemetery are located. Whereas Crossroads Church has agreed to provide all pertinent archives to the Minnesota Annual Conference so the history and membership records of the congregation is preserved. Therefore be it resolved that Crossroads Church be disaffiliated from the Minnesota Annual Conference of the United Methodist Church upon fulfillment of all these terms of the disaffiliation agreement no later than October 15th, 2022, and that the Minnesota Annual Conference Board of Trustees are hereby authorized to release our rights under the trust clause on all property and assets as outlined in the property disclosure upon completion of the terms of the disaffiliation agreement. I move item 403.
That item is properly before the conference. Do you have questions? Thank you. Microphone 6.
Paul Marzon, senior pastor and founding pastor of Crossroads Church Multi-Site. On behalf of our church, I'd just like to thank the Minnesota Annual Conference, and on behalf of my wife, Pastor Deb, and myself personally. I'm a 5th generation Methodist from Minnesota. went to Hamlin Methodist College, Garrett Evangelical Seminary, and most recently got my doctorate from Asbury. And I was blessed to be a part of this conference. This will be my 40th year attending here. And it saddens me, but I remember the bishop sharing a passage of scripture. And he reminded us that we're not Solomon cutting the baby in two. He reminded us that we're not divorcing, in which case we fight over assets. But we talked about Paul and Barnabas. And when they came to a sharp disagreement, they parted ways and said that they're going to bless one another in each other's mission. That's with a heavy heart, that's what I'm doing this day. And on behalf of our church, as we're blessing the Minnesota Annual Conference, and we hope that you'll bless us as well as we chart a new path and we continue to do ministry to make disciples of Jesus Christ for the transformation of the world. And although we may have different methodologies, at the heart of it, we love Jesus, and we want to reach more people for Jesus. So I want to thank the Board of Trustees, you, Bishop, and as others who participated, our District Superintendent, Cynthia Williams, and others who walked along the process with us, and also Alan Williams, our key lay leader and Ad Council Chair, who led us through the process. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Paul. I'm not seeing anyone else wishing to speak. Oh, microphone 6, please.
Hello, everyone. My name is Alan Campbell. I'm the lay leader at Crossroads. I too want to thank the Minnesota Annual Conference for working with us expeditiously, and we want to wish you well based on our church conference meetings, and hope that one day we'll fellowship together.
Thank you. It appears you're ready to vote. If you would approve this motion that comes from the Conference Board of Trustees, please raise your hand. Thank you. If you're opposed, please raise your hand. The motion carries. Rachel?
Our next item for disaffiliation is for Redeeming Grace Community Church in Lake City. The terms that I read for the previous resolution are the same, with the exception of the numbers. And so I will read the paragraph relevant to the numbers. Whereas the Board of Trustees of the Minnesota Annual Conference has approved the completed disaffiliation agreement that outlined a payment of $118,835,000.73 of the church's pro rata share of the Minnesota Annual Conference's unfunded aggregate pension obligation, and that the church will have paid $19,367 for its previous 12 months of apportionments and will pay an additional $19,367 for the next 12 months of apportionments. The congregation approved their disaffiliation agreement at a duly called church conference on May 16th, 2022, and it passed by a 2/3 majority vote. And we move item 401.
Was there a date? Is this also no?
Oh, so everything's the same. So
later than October
I can read that section again for you, Bishop.
No, that's okay. I just wanted to make sure that.
Yeah, okay. So I'll read these two relevant paragraphs as requested. As all property and assets of the Redeeming Grace Community Church have been disclosed to the Conference Board of Trustees, and the property to leave with the church include the church building located at 213 North Oak Street, Lake City, Minnesota, a parsonage located at 1107 Garden Street, Lake City, Minnesota, and a cemetery located in Wabasha County, and the land on which the buildings and cemetery are located. And that too carries a date of no later than October 15th, 2022 for the terms to be completed.
Thank you. That motion is appropriately before us. Would anyone like to speak to it? Microphone 6.
My name is Phil Schmidt. I'm the pastor at Redeeming Grace Community Church in Lake City. And unlike Paul, I did not grow up in the Methodist Church. I came to the Methodist Church much later in my life, and there's none more zealot than a convert. And I've been passionately involved with not just the United Methodist Church, but the whole Wesleyan theology that goes along with it. But like Paul, this is probably the most difficult thing I've ever done in life and ministry. I am coming up on nearly 30 years in this annual conference, and I look around at annual conference and I know so many. And if anyone knows me, I hope you know that I've always loved you. I've always done my very best to not just know that I love you, but share the fact that I do. And for us to leave the Minnesota Annual Conference of the United Methodist Church is a very difficult, well thought out, deeply discussed decision that has taken us probably 6 years to truly work through all of this. I would also like to say thank you, especially to the Minnesota Annual Conference and the Board of Trustees that made this process extraordinarily fair. There were no hidden agendas that we saw, no hidden fees that we saw, that it was a matter of just simply allowing us to shake hands and leave as friends. And I certainly hope that although I won't be at these annual conference sessions any longer, that you'll know that my heart is always here as we continually to press forward to share the good news of Jesus Christ with a hurting and broken world. Know that we will continue on with that process, knowing very well that you will as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Others wish to speak? It appears you're ready to vote. If you would approve this item presented by the Board of Trustees, please raise your hand. Thank you. Any opposed? Thank you. The motion carries. Rachel.
Bishop, I move the disaffiliation of Hillspring Church in New Prague, and I'll read the relevant paragraphs with different information. The duly called church conference of Hillspring Church, in which they voted on this, was passed with a 2/3 majority vote on May 16th to disaffiliate from the United Methodist Church. Whereas the Board of Trustees of the Minnesota Annual Conference approved the completed disaffiliation agreement that outlined a payment of $50,719.30 of the church's pro rata share of the Minnesota Annual Conference's unfunded aggregate pension obligations, and $12,900 for the current year and future year apportionments of the congregation, and that was approved at their duly called church conference on May 22nd, 2022. The property and assets of the Hillspring Church that have been disclosed to the Conference Board of Trustees and the property to leave with the church include the church building located at 200 East 280th Street, New Prague, Minnesota, and the land on which the building is located. And this too is supposed to be executed no later than October 15th for the terms to be completed. And Bishop, I move item 402.
That is properly before us. Is there anyone who wishes to speak to it? Seeing none, I assume you're ready to vote. If you would approve this item, please raise your hand. Thank you. If you're opposed, please raise your hand. Thank you, and that motion also carries.
Many thanks, Bishop. That concludes the report of the trustee.